everybody.
Good evening, Father Kevin.
Thank you. Good to be here with everybody. What am I supposed to talk about tonight? What's the topic? Father Harry didn't announce the topic. I forgot. Does anyone have the topic? Something about God stays, things change.
Things change, God remains.
Things change, God remains. Okay, I think that's what I'm going to talk about. I have to wear readers now. I'm aging. Hey, it is so good to be back here, and many of you know I was here Monday for Harry Leyland's funeral, so it's like I'm just back in Butler now. I just live 45 minutes away. I did want to point out, my folks made it up here tonight. They're right back here again. So, anytime I run across from somebody from Butler, the first question they ask me, how are your parents? Everybody in Butler asks me, how are your parents? They ask me how are your parents doing? So, of course, they made it up. And they were up for Festa Italia. And I didn't make it up this year, I couldn't make it up. But my mom says, oh, they don't, all the people of Butler is not the same people. They don't even know who we are anymore. I said, give me a break, Mom, come on. They know who you are. So when Father Harry asked me to do this talk a while ago, I said, sure, I'll push it to January. That way I'll have plenty of time to prepare. But as we know, time shrinks. And time has dwindled. And the last couple of days, I'm going, oh my goodness, when am I going to have time to truly prepare for this? So I figured we could do three things here tonight. I could simply do impersonations all night, starting with Dave Malarkey, since he's not here. He's not gravely ill or anything, is he? Is he really sick? Or is he okay? Do we know? Does he just have a flu? No,
We don't know.
Hopefully he's just got a flu. Tonight, Dave Malarkey here, WISR Radio. An Irish joke. Listen to radio. Father Harry listens to me all the time, every day. I didn't practice that at all. So it's either we simply just enjoy being together here tonight, and I tell funny stories about my life, or we learn a little bit of something, go away learning something, or you are truly inspired and are inspired to change and be transformed when you go away from one of these events, or all of the above, or none of the above. What I'm going to try to do is really kind of compile what's most recent in my noggin with maybe nuggets from recent homilies that I've given. That who here has been at a recent Mass of mine at St. Al's? I know Jamie was. Jamie was. I don't know if anybody else was. So good. Nuggets from a few of recent homilies that I've given, and then in conjunction with two books. And I don't want this to be just like a book report. That's boring. But one of the books I've already spoken about up here, called Falling Upward by Father Richard Rohr. Yet that book just keeps on coming back to me and coming back to me. It's been very, very influential in my life. The second book is called Strangers in a Strange Land. It's more recently published. And what's interesting about the authors of the books is that they're both from Kansas. Father Richard Rohr, and the author is Charles Chaput, Strangers in a Strange Land. And Chaput is the Archbishop of Philadelphia. They're both from Kansas. They're both Franciscans. They're both white. They're both about the same age. Yet they are opposite ends of the spectrum regarding liberal or conservative. Total ends of it. And I think one of the beauties of that is the church is big enough to hold that, and big enough literally, figuratively, and it's good to read here, and everything in between, right, and to take it in. And what I found interesting, I read Rohr's book, Falling Upward, 2 times and on it for the 3rd time, and it's not a read where it's cover to cover, I'm done, I put it away, right? It's a read where you highlight, underline, write notes in, pray over it, read it again, go, oh my goodness, this is some just valuable stuff. And Strangers in a Strange Land is similar, different writing styles, but similar way to read the book. And I'm going through it a second time right now. I haven't gotten through it completely, but going through it a second time right now. Yet, even though they're on the polar ends of the spectrum, they arrive at the same point. And the point is Jesus Christ, right? And who we are as participants in God's family. So I'll go through those a little bit and see if we can tie them together and maybe give you something to think about when you leave here. As Father Harry said, no, we're not going to do Q&A at the end. That just means I won't get out of here. So I'll be here for a while, you guys, but that's fine with me. If you have any questions after, if you just want to chat afterwards. I have a cousin that is big and big. Right? He's used to be an amateur heavyweight boxer and has a real dry, wry, observational, witty sense of humor. He lives in South Carolina now. And one of the things that he recently said was, every time I visit Pittsburgh, 99% of the time, no matter who I'm with, family, friends, no matter who I'm with, business associates, the first question that people ask me is, Frank, when did you arrive? When did you arrive? He said, you know what the second question is 99% of the time? Frank, when are you leaving? It's unbelievable. He's like, I just arrived and you're asking me when I'm leaving already? You're kicking me out? You're sending me home? I find myself doing the same thing over the holidays. If someone was visiting in town, so when did you get up? So when did you leave? When are you leaving? Right? Same question. And then it leads us then to other conversation topics that are very surface level. So how was your travel? How was the weather? Did you have any snags? Did you go a different route? It's ancillary stuff. Right? Yet, the essence of who we are and our fulfillment is talking about the best things in life. But they're the hardest things in life to talk about. God. Love. Faith. Mercy. Forgiveness. Most of our conversations are not about the best things in life because they're too hard to talk about. Rather, they're supposed to be lived and experienced. And then for sure, maybe that's one of the reasons why we have church, why we have groups within parish families, so it gives us avenues to enter into those types of conversations and then integrate them into who we are and take them with us into our lives. Right? Best things in life are so hard to talk about, but rather to be experienced and to be lived. So we look at the conclusion of what these two authors, these two priests, have come to is we have to look at how we are participating in God's family. And part of that is looking at ourselves, each and every one of us in that participation in God's family. This is falling upward, which I have already alluded to in a previous talk here. And I just want to offer some quotes that Rohr offers. And these are not his quotes. The greatest and most important problems of life are fundamentally unsolvable. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. Carl Jung. This is a Native American aphorism. No wise person ever wanted to be younger. No wise person ever wanted to be younger. This is from James Hollis, who is a psychotherapist. The world, and this is about aging, the world is more magical, less predictable, more autonomous, less controllable, more varied, less simple, more infinite, less knowable, more wonderfully troubling than we could have imagined being able to tolerate when we were young. So it's looking at what I've really come to experience, the tensions and the paradoxes of life, and living within those tensions, living within those paradoxes of faith and life, because they will never go away. Things don't get simpler as we grow in wisdom. They grow more complicated. But we're not supposed to just leave the family. As people ask my cousin, when are you leaving? We're supposed to stay. And that, however we stay, will change as we age. It will change. So how we hold faith, tensions of life as we age, as participants in God's family, is I think where I kind of got the topic. As things change, God remains. The book Strangers in a Strange Land, written by Chaput, he really looks at the history of the United States and Christianity itself. Has anybody read this book by chance? It's worth it. It's worth a read. Strangers in a Strange Land, Living the Catholic Faith in a Post-Christian World. Charles Chaput. And what's interesting about Chaput is he did a lot. When he was younger, when he was a younger man, he spent it up here in Herman at St. Fidelis. So he was a student there, along with some of some of the caps that are still around up here. I was talking to Father Scott Seataller and Father John Getzi. They're both on the North Hills, not too far from where I am. And I asked them, I was reading the book, you guys know Chaput? Yeah, he's my classmate, he was a year behind me. Seataller was really funny, because I said, yeah, it says here, Chaput, member of the Prairie Band Potawatomi Nation. He was the second Native American to be ordained a bishop in the United States, and is the first Native American archbishop. But when I mentioned to the Father Scott Seataller and John Getzi, I said, so he's like the first, I just rephrased that. He's like Native American? And Scott Seataller goes, barely. Barely. I love the caps. Barely. His premise, though, is this. America, think about this one. It's the only country in the world that is not based on bloodlines, but rather an idea. America is the only country in the world not based on bloodlines, but based on an idea. Okay? So, what he means by that is, people can come from other parts of the world, it's harder and harder these days, but can come to this country and be granted American United States citizenship. And on the day they are granted that citizenship, they can look to any one of us born and bred here and say, I am as American as you. But none of us can go to any other country and say, I am as Nigerian as you, if we become a citizen of that country. I am as Canadian as you. I am as French as you. To any of the people who are natives of those countries. We can't do that. How unique this country is and how it was founded upon. Not upon the roots of the bloodlines and of royalty and of kingdoms, but on an idea. And he looks at how the founding fathers, and I'm not going to go through all of that. I'll leave that up to you to read if you'd like. But the principles that the country was founded on and how we've arrived to where we are today. That's the bulk of this book. And he talks, let me see if I have my notes here. A lot about lack of trust, technology, politics. He's very politically astute. free sex, sexual revolution, sexual identity, family breakdown, marriage, the breakdown of marriage and family, immigration, and economics. Heavily about those topics in this book. 2/3 of it go through like we're going to hell in a handbasket. It's kind of what it goes through, the whole thing. I'm like, oh my goodness, this is depressing after a while. I mean, and he makes legit arguments for how technology has devalued life and how we are, so hung up on doing and not being, and we're losing our relationships, and we're losing the sanctity of life, and families are broken down, and they're like, what's your solution to all this? Well, it's no surprise, Jesus Christ. And in the scriptures, and specifically he goes to the Beatitudes first, and then goes from there. And he says, well, then each one of us have to look ourselves in the mirror and say, okay, how are we going to turn this all around? We have to start with you and I, and the looking of each other in the mirror and going from there. So, falling in line with that, I'm just going to give you 3 experiences of mine that rarely you would have heard of happening in anybody here's lifetime, however the oldest person is in this room right now, to the youngest person in the room. These things probably would have never happened within our lifetimes, yet they're happening today. And you're like, oh my goodness. Now, I'm going to tell you these 3 things. My parents have never heard these 3 things. Right? When I go home, I think my family has learned by now that when we're together, like, I don't talk shop. And one of my sisters is a parishioner as well at St. Alphonsus. Oh my goodness. So I think she's finally starting to get it, because 2 Thanksgivings ago, and I'll tell you exactly what happened right before that Thanksgiving. I won't go into all the details, but it was brutal. And she started talking about the religious education program and this and this and that. I said, Jennifer, I don't want to talk shop. And she said, you never want to talk shop. So I went right downstairs where all the kids were playing like building blocks and stuff. And I just stayed down there and was totally zoned out for the rest of the time. But it harkens back to when I first was assigned here. You're just getting used to, the family's getting used to me being a member of the clergy, and what happens in your life. And one dinner I said to Father Harry, Harry, when you're around your family, do you ever talk about what you do? And he goes, no, they have no idea what I'm doing. No idea what I do. No idea. I was like, thank goodness, there's somebody else. So that's good. No idea what I do. No idea. No idea what I do. Those exact words. No idea what I do. Don't verify. No idea what I do. And I said, and then he would tell how his dad was with us on this earth, would hear about something in the news that happened in Butler. There's an arrest, there is a shooting or something like that. Something criminal, something violent. And he would call up his son and say, Harry, I heard that happened in Butler. Isn't that near where you live? And Harry would say, no, Dad, that's way on the other side of town. That happened right next door. No, Dad, way on the other side of town. Don't worry, Dad, don't worry about it. So these things I'm going to say, like, my parents don't know about these things. Well, they'll hear about them now. Now they'll know. But, okay. Scenario number 1. These have all happened since I've been gone from here. Some of them very recently. Meeting a couple who wants to have their child baptized. And the husband is Catholic, the wife is not. They were married in the Catholic Church. I hear rumblings from other people that know this couple. She's not really Catholic friendly. She's not really Catholic friendly, right? And she's pulling him away from the Catholic faith. So I meet with them and I talk with both of them. And there's nothing hostile, nothing antagonistic about the conversation, nothing negative about the conversation. But at the end of the conversation, she says something like, well, after we get our child baptized in the Catholic Church, we're just going to go have our child baptized in a regular church too. And I'm like, well, you don't have to. You don't have to do that. So, well, we're just going to do it anyway. All right, so then how do you handle that pastorally? Right? So then you have dad who's a Catholic, and if you're going to have a child baptized, those of you who've had children baptized Catholic, you make a promise. Right? You make big time promises that you will do everything that you can to raise that child in the faith. So I have to talk to dad now about what are your intentions as a Catholic dad, as a Catholic husband. You got married in the Catholic Church. Your wife should know about these types of things. What's your intent going forward? Okay, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but something that I talked to other priests that have been around for a while. I said, we never had to deal with that. Just get baptized in the church. That was it. Second one now, we're going a little bit heavier. This is recent, where I hear of a death of a 20-year-old just in college in Chicago, and just died. No foul play, some kind of brain aneurysm, just died. Very rare, right? 20-year-olds will still die without any foul play or anything like that. And a number of people from my parish say, did you know this? Did you know this? Do you know this family? The mom and dad, they're Catholic. They never come to church, but they're Catholic. But they're going to need your help. They're going to need you. And so, well, typically the funeral home will contact us, and then we'll go from there. And they did. So the family came on in. The mom and the dad came on in, and we talked. I listened primarily, just listened. And then when it came time for them to say, okay, what are we going to do about a funeral? We discussed the Mass. And the dad said, we haven't been to any kind of church since 2006. Any kind of church. Both of our children were baptized Catholic, but we haven't been into a Catholic church. In fact, we even went to a non-denominational Christian community for a few times. We haven't even been there since 2006. I said, well, we'll do what we can to help you through this time. And went through the Mass itself. So going through the Mass, and they haven't been to Mass in 10 plus years, and probably weren't too involved prior to that. But going through it, then questions arose, which it happens at times at funerals. And I'm trying to be really, really accommodating. So it was, first question was, well, music. My son was friends with a young man who's like a concert pianist. Can he play? I said, for sure, just contact the musical director. They can discuss about him playing in different parts of the Mass. Well, what about a song that's not churchy, like during the Mass? And I said, well, it just doesn't fit for a few different reasons. I've been at funerals, weddings where they've tried it. It doesn't fit. It's really not supposed to enter into that. Kind of keep the liturgical music where it should be. But I'd be willing to do it before Mass begins, when everybody is seated. If you want to have, this young man's a concert pianist, classically trained, to play some piece beforehand, I would be fine with that. And they didn't seem to have any problems with that. And then, I went through the readers, gift bearers, family participation. And then they said, well, what about a eulogy? And I said, well, oftentimes it's best to give a eulogy either at the funeral home prior to, the night before, when family is gathered around. You don't have to stand in front of a microphone. It's more of an intimate setting. You don't really have to have anything prepared. Just let the Spirit move you. Speak from the heart. Let the tears flow. Let the laughter flow. They didn't seem to disagree with that, but they said, well, we really want someone to speak at the Mass. And I said, well, okay, I'll allow one eulogy after communion, and I'll call you up. And the dad said, I want to do that. And I said, well, that's fine. And then the mom said to the dad, no, I don't want you doing that. And then they started going at it. And I said, well, let's just take a step back. It's a highly charged, highly emotional moment for everybody right now. We don't have to make that decision right now. We can make that decision later in the week. I'll come by the funeral home. Then they started talking about, well, she wanted 2 other people to speak. And I said, well, you could do it at the luncheon afterwards. Would be a nice spot to do it before you eat. You could do it at the cemetery. There's a mausoleum, so it will be indoors. That's a good spot to go to as well. The family member or a friend has the final word after I give the final blessing to the prayers, the committal prayers at the cemetery. You can do it then. It didn't seem to object too much about that. Then she said, the mom said, well, on the way out, can we play a John Mayer song? John Mayer's like a pop guy, a recessional. I said, well, no, again, it just doesn't fit. You might want to do that. You could do that at the luncheon as well. That might be a good time to play that type of music at the luncheon. And the dad seems like agree with that, but she wasn't so agreeable to that. As we were leaving, we went into the church just to show them, just to kind of give them an idea of the size, expecting a lot of people for this funeral. And I think the most painful words that I heard when the dad walked in, he goes, so it took our son's death for us to get back into a church. So I thought we handled it okay. I thought I did okay handling that one. And then 2 days later, I get a text from my pastoral associate that says, do you realize they're not having the funeral here now? It was already published in the paper, funeral at St. Alphonsus Church. Do you realize this? They're not having it? They're moving into the non-denominational Christian church right down the street. And I said, no one called. They didn't call. So I get on the horn with the funeral director right away. And he said, yeah, you didn't know? I said, isn't that your responsibility? So I was pretty upset with the funeral director. He apologized profusely. But I said, yeah, I went over with them. They could have a service at the funeral home where you could do your music that you want. You can have as many people as you want to speak at the funeral home. We can do all of that, have your musicians come and play, and you can still have the priest there. So that by the time that they were talking to me, that didn't even come up. That didn't even come up as the options as far as having the funeral at the funeral home, not in the church. Because what the Mass is turned out not to be what they needed, what they were looking for at that point in time. And I talked to the dad later that day, and he said, I felt a little bit, I don't know if it's better, but less bad after talking to him when he said, no, it's not like, because initially the Catholic was, oh, there's the Catholic Church again. So rigid, turning people away, not allowing them to participate at this point in time of hurt in their lives. Right? So you're never going to get them back. Never. And I just wanted to say to them, if I did anything, I apologize. And he said, no, you know, my wife, she said she wanted all the bells and whistles for my son, for our son. And we want all the bells and whistles, was the phrase that they used. So I talked to the funeral director again, and he said the non-denominational Christian community, which does a lot of good things, they won't allow they don't deal with death very well. They don't do these. They don't do funeral services often. This is not part of their MO. And they told the family, we're not allowed to have the body come into the church. So the casket stayed outside in the hearse. But the family was okay with that, as long as they got to do the bells and whistles and music and whatnot inside. So the body stayed in the hearse with the funeral directors, watching it while they had their funeral services inside. Never had to deal with those types of things years ago. Right? So whatever the reasons are, wherever our people are, along with the dad saying that we were in the church, was just by my observation with them, they were basing their son's salvation on how great of a kid he was, not on that he has a Savior. in Jesus Christ. That just stood out in my conversation and listening to them. And in part, that's what Shapu is saying in the book. We're not relying upon God anymore. We've become so self-reliant and self-absorbed. Where do we go from here? Now, those folks were in their late 40s. But Shapu points out a lot of concerns about millennials, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. He'll point out concerns, but I'll tell you, Richard Rohr's point of view would come from a different angle, where he would say, no, wait a second here. So we'll talk about that a little bit. Lastly, this one happened right before Thanksgiving a few years ago, the week before Thanksgiving a few years ago. Now, keep this in mind. This is an incredibly delicate, tender situation that when you're done with it, you go, they didn't teach us how to handle this in seminary. In fact, like 99% of the things, they didn't teach us how to handle in seminary. At the school that we're responsible for, now it's called Blessed Francis Silo School. It's not St. Alphonsus School anymore, it's a merged school. It's like we have Butler Catholic here, except you guys, your school merger is way in the past. We're going through it right now. So if any of you were around back then for the school merger, I don't know if you've purged any memories, but it probably wasn't easy when you're closing schools and merging schools and changing names and whatnot. So I'm going through that right now.
But you took the Saints.
And and I had nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. Matt said the Saints. The Saints is the name, the mascot of the new Blessed Francis Sealos Academy. It's called the Saints, just like Butler Catholics. So, you can't please everybody. My goodness, you can't please anybody sometimes. So, this was at the school, and this was the week before Thanksgiving when the mom called a meeting with myself, their child, and they had 4 children in the school at that time, all girls. And the mom called myself, the first grader's teacher, the principal, and a psychiatrist together. And myself, the principal, and the teacher, we talked about this a little bit afterwards, that we had an idea of what the meeting would be like, but when all of us are called together, we didn't realize the heaviness of what was about to come. When we're anticipating the mom, because of this child, who was it's just this lovable child, who would run up to me and grab onto my hand and I would just pick her up, and athletic and tomboy. When they would say, our child, our first grader, is transgender. Okay? Child is transgender. Our girl wants to be a boy. And then you sit with these people over the next 2 hours in this meeting, and you see them broken, and their faces sullen. They're not bigger people. And the toll that this is taking on them, physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. Heaviness for 2 hours. And they were at that point in time where they were ready to just start treating their daughter as a son. I can tell you on the school end and the parish end, we were not ready. No. Okay. This was brand new to us. This is something this family had been struggling with for a while. So how do you deal with truth and love at the same time? I can tell you, it's incredibly challenging. So I'm thinking, I got this parish community and I got this school community that's going to find out about this. How are they going to react? How are they going to respond? How are they going to deal with it? Because what this family going through right now is a living hell. They didn't ask for this. They're not agenda setters. They don't want to get on the news. They don't want to parade. They don't want to fly flags. They're just dealing with something they never thought they would have to deal with in their life. And the first thoughts of all of us that have no idea, no experience with this is, a first grader?
Yes.
how does a first grader know anything about anything? And they would go into detail about the last few years of their lives with this child and the struggles that they're having with this child. And they're ready to start using male pronouns and calling the child by a different name, a male name. Where are we on this thing? You talk about head spinning. I'm asking the diocese, have you guys had any experience with this? Nope, good luck, Kevin. We're the guinea pigs in this one. The closest thing we could find was schools in Vancouver, Canada, Catholic schools in Vancouver, Canada, that had any kind of policy on how to deal with this. I'm talking to the superintendent of Parishes schools, which our school is located in that school district, whom I happen to know, not well, but happen to know for a number of years. And he's going over with me, oh yeah, we got policies in place, and yes, this is how we treat things, and like, to me, I was like, man, they got everything under control. Then within like 2 weeks, Pine Ridge School District going bonkers with transgender bathroom usage. I'm like, yeah, you guys got it under control. And that went to a lawsuit. They went to courts for Pine Ridge. So how do we deal with this? It's coming up on the holidays. Now you know, Mom, Dad, now you know why I was like non-existent that day at Thanksgiving, right? I was just there in body. I was not gonna handle it. So it's the holidays, so there's a lot of vacation time, time off, time away for diocesan folks, and the family's ready. Like, they're ready. They're ready for the school to start addressing the child by a new name and using male pronouns. Myself, the principal, and the teacher going over, how do we handle this thing? Can we handle it? With our value system, is this truth? What do we, the mama said, the daughter was she was all girl. She was all girl. Physically, she was all girl. She was all girl. Yet something was going on that was telling her she wanted to be a boy. How are you going to handle it? We finally got the diocese, finally gave us just a brief policy, and what about, like, bathroom usage is like the least of your worries. But the child wasn't even of age to play sports yet. What would you do with locker room usage? Right? How the kids are going to keep on calling the child the name that they know the child by. We'll do our best. We'll do our best. Within a few days of the new year, meaning January, when school commenced after the Christmas break, actually after the first day, we were told, you guys are fantastic. We were told by the family, you guys are fantastic. You guys, the teachers have been awesome, the families have been awesome for understanding, and okay, we're trying, we're doing our best. Then a week or 2 weeks later, they just took the child and all their girls out of school and sent them to the public school as a fresh start. Something new, something fresh. And I felt bad because they left the parish as well and went to a different parish as well. And then the word came back where we didn't feel welcome. We didn't feel. But those poor folks are going through so much. I pray for them every day. Again, they didn't ask for any of this stuff. And what they must be going through is unprecedented, unwanted. So you wouldn't have to deal with that years ago. Priests didn't have to deal with that one years ago. Teachers weren't dealing with that one years ago. Principals weren't dealing with that one years ago. So again, Chapu, he goes into that. He goes into transgender and sexual identity in his book, too, and at length of, we don't even know who we are anymore. The flip side to that, though, is all these people are loved sons and daughters of God. This little child is still a loved child of God. The poor 3 other girls are all going through psychological counseling right now. Suddenly they have a younger brother. They're all loved. We still have to treat them lovingly. I'm not going to scoff and yell at them and scold them and tell them you don't know what you're doing as parents. But the realities. So there's that tension. Identity, sexual identity, love, still there. So, real things we have to deal with these days. Okay, so those are the heaviness things. Those are just 3 brief examples. We could go on and on and on about how bad things are today. how much worse they are than they were years ago. Here's some things. Flip that around. Flip that around. Where, as Billy Joel said, in the 1980s, the good old days weren't always that good, and tomorrow ain't as bad as it seems. Okay? This is coming from some of you. When I was here, that would tell me, when you were younger, your dad would not allow you to date the German Catholic girl from across the city. Because you're Italian and Catholic, and she's German and Catholic. God forbid you date a German Catholic girl. That's happened in everyone's lifetime that's alive these days. Huh? How absurd is that? How absurd is that? It doesn't happen anymore, nor should it. Right? That's something that's better. In our lifetimes, African Americans were not allowed to drink out of the same water fountain as whites. Absurd. Absurd. That's better today. There's a young boy in our school who's a 7th grader right now. Participates in every sport. Just had a recent checkup. We got thumbs up. 8 years ago, heart transplant. Got someone else's heart in him. And he has no limitations or restrictions in his life. Wouldn't happen 60 years ago. Advances in technology can be absolutely beautiful and life-giving at the same time. So we could go on and on and on, go back and forth, what's better, what's not. Okay. How do we live within the tensions of all of that and more as God's sons and daughters, participants in His family? Shapu says this. We live in an age that imagines itself as postmodern and post-Christian. It's a time defined by noise, urgency, restless action, utility, and a hunger for ever greater efficiencies and practical results. But there's nothing really new about any of this. St. Paul would find our age rather familiar. For all the slogans about hope and change and a future we can believe in American politics, our urgencies hide a deep unease about the future. A kind of well-manicured and selfish despair. The world around us has a hole in its heart, and the emptiness causes pain. Only God can fill it. In our baptism, God called each of us to be His partners in that holy work. Like St. Paul, we need to be doers of the word and not hearers only. We prove what we really believe by our willingness or our refusal to act on what we claim to believe. Furthermore, an Eastern Orthodox writer describes a counterculture that places that we make for ourselves together. This is vital for handling on the faith to our children. He continues, again, he's quoting an Eastern Orthodox writer. If we do not form our consciences and the consciences of our children to be distinctly Christian and distinctly countercultural, even if that means some degree of intentional separation from the mainstream, we are not going to survive. The primary focus of faithful Christians in America should be cultural, or rather, countercultural. building the institutions and habits that will carry the faith and the faithful forward through the next dark age. The formation of consciences is so vital, and it starts in the home. Starts in the home. A lot of folks that send their children to Catholic school think it starts in the Catholic school, and it's totally responsible in the Catholic school. No. It starts in the home. Catholic education is a wonderful environment and tool to support the formation of the conscience, so that when we do wrong, we know it. And then we take steps to counteract it. That's so critical. So what the faith gives us is the introspection of the conscience, to form Catholic consciences, hearts and minds, to be able to be developed as time moves, so that when we do recognize these brutalities that are going on, these utilitarian scientific experiments that are going on. I mean, there's a crazy world out there that's going on and looking into like cloning the human person, and they just degenerate to get no. All right, forget I said that. That just reduces the dignity of human life, denigrates the human life and the sanctity of life. Right? So that Catholic consciences are formed, so that these young men and women, when they're in these situations, they're like, okay, I'm a scientist, I'm brilliant, I can contribute to the world or not. How am I going to do it? There are an awful lot of young millennials now. We'll finish up with the millennials. Awful lot of them that are going into the fields of science. Biology, science, medicine, awful lot of them. Just 2 weeks ago, I had a young adult meeting, a young adult get-together, and we had 20-somethings, roughly. Some were just under 20, just started college. And going around the room and asking them what their field of study is in or their line of work is in. Most of them, something to do in line with the sciences. Most research, scientists, medicine, nursing, those types of jobs, those types of professions, those types of environments. And what was hopeful about that evening with the millennials was that the ones that have been raised with good Catholic consciences are the ones, God willing, that will lead in the future. Those, they do care. Okay? They're not just out for themselves and want to give and receive as much technology as possible, right, all the time. It's part of who they are. It's an appendage now, let's face it. How many of us have our cell phone on us right now? Surprised one hasn't gone off so far. That's a good thing, right? Right. I don't have mine on me. This is great. Got a friend of mine who lost his job, and his phone was with work, and he doesn't have a phone now. And he said, I don't want one. I don't want one. He said, I can do without a job for a little while. My wife works. I said, oh, you got the life, man. You kidding me? Live it up, man. What are you live it up right now? He's like, I don't want it right now. I don't want it. But it's part of life. It's not going to go away. But I was encouraged, and particularly 3 of them shared what they were doing before going back to second semester of college. 2 of them were going on retreat. One was going on, and she'd never been on a retreat before, and she was a retreat leader as part of this. 20-year-old. Another one was going on an 8-day silent retreat. Could you do that? 8 days. No phone, no internet, no tweeting, no TV, no talking. 8 days. You talk about going to the depths of the conscience and getting to know yourself and your God. Beautiful and inspirational. She's 21. Well, other one, spoke about, before going back, and this was an experience last week for her, through her college, but locally here in Pittsburgh, the college isn't, it's some Catholic school in Indiana called Notre Dame. That through Notre Dame, she was going and experiencing what's called an urban plunge. Last week, her and a number of her peers, like 12 other kids, I think, young women, spent, I think, 3 days, 2 nights in the city of Pittsburgh with the homeless and sleeping in a shelter and eating the meals that they would eat at the Red Door is one of them down, Jubilee Soup Kitchen down there in Pittsburgh. One of the things her mom told her before she went away to college was, when you go away to college, don't just go to get a degree, get good grades. Take advantage of the full experience that is offered to you that you will never get a chance to enter into again. That's the essence of the experience, in this case, of higher education. But in addition to that, I think we can apply that wise piece of advice to other parts of life. We don't go to Mass just to get a good grade with God. God doesn't work that way. I'm afraid to tell you that. I mean, a lot of us think that way. That's how we were raised. You got to go, fulfill your obligation. God doesn't work that way. God's love remains. We go to Mass to encounter God in a way that is no better this side of life. To experience and encounter Jesus Christ through His Word, through other people, and through Eucharist. It's an encounter with the living God. And to take that out then into the world. That is how we live within the tensions that will always remain. And it starts with you and I. Looking into the mirror saying, who am I being called to be? Continuously. It doesn't matter how young or old we are. Who am I being called to be today? And when I mess up, we have the medicine. We have the medicine in confession and Eucharist as Catholics. It doesn't get any better than that, this side of life. So, through this young adult group last week, 2 weeks ago, whatever it was, I came away hope-filled and hopeful of our future. In fact, not even of our future, but right now. What these 3 young adults are doing right now is good stuff. Is participation in God's family. How God and who God is calling them to be today. I'm going to finish by reading last week's gospel. This is from John. You probably forgot it already. John was standing with 2 of his disciples, and as he watched Jesus walk by, he said, "Behold, the Lamb of God." The 2 disciples heard what he said and followed Jesus. Jesus turned and saw them following him and said to them, "What are you looking for?" They said to him, "Rabbi," which translated means teacher. "Where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come, and you will see." So they went and saw where Jesus was staying, and they stayed with him that day. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, the brother of Simon Peter, was one of the 2 who heard John and followed Jesus. He first found his own brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated Christ. Then he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated Peter. It can't just come from priests. It can't just come from bishops. It can't just come from religious. Peter, the leader of the church in John's gospel, needed help from his brother, his peer, Andrew, to come and follow Jesus. It has to come from within. It has to come from all. And to stick around. They stayed with Jesus. Let us pray. Good and loving God, as we gather here today, continuing to discern our vocations, who we were called to be, and what you want us to do, we thank you for that opportunity. May we continue to participate in your life, one moment, one day at a time, through the struggles, through the sacrifices, through the beauties, through the new life, through it all, especially through Christ our Lord. Amen.